Howdy. So I realized something today, and reading as well on some events over in Ukraine in the not conflict, war, call it what it is going on. I had a dream, I want to say late last year or early this year, but it was before the stuff going on in Ukraine. And I think I realized I don't consider myself, someone who is just gonna come out here and just predict major world events. But sometimes I think I see some things, and they seem so outlandish that I kind of maybe don't realize the weight or the impact. But I've had actually a couple wartime dreams, and one of them, and sometimes not everybody dreams in color or dreams in the same detail, and I understand that sometimes that's a gift. Some people have that depth or see crazy things and you just write it off as your mind or whatever. But I see things as if they're a movie playing out. Sometimes I'm in it, as in like the actor or the object, and sometimes I'm watching, and sometimes it's a hybrid. Sometimes I'm the character or one of the characters, and then sometimes I see the character played out like from another point of view. And I had this scene in one of my dreams that I just remembered today, where it was during wartime and it was at a checkpoint, and in a wooded area, and there were maybe half a dozen guards or so, and there were people who were trying to get across the border. There were maybe 2 or 3 dozen people, civilians, and there was one person in it. Again, I want to say it's kind of this hybrid of that this main guy was me, but it also looked like somebody else, not me. And sometimes I think perhaps we're seeing through the eyes of somebody else, and we're witnessing events from their perspective. So I had this dream, and this guy was trying to get through this border checkpoint, and he had this little girl that he was watching, 10 years old, maybe a little bit less, that he was trying to, I don't know if smuggle is the right word, he was trying to get her across the border. And I just remember the soldiers looking at the guy's papers, saying, okay, you're good to go through. And then stopping the little girl that he's escorting. He's trying to get her across. And he's not with everybody else civilian-wise, he's just with this girl. And so he starts to walk, a few, 5-6 feet or something, as if he's going to go ahead and leave her behind. And then basically turns around and quickly dispatches the half a dozen or so guards, and everybody gets through. And that's one of those things that seems a little kind of crazy, like to dream something like that. But when we see what's going on and we hear what's going on with the civilians, and they're leaving and they're trying to flee, and there are people who are getting through, who are being let through, and then there are people who are not being let through. There are people who are being, again, brutally shot with their hands tied behind their back. And, you have arguments of things are fake or things are being set up for pictures. And I actually know, because of an extended family member who has witnessed wartime events where things were done to create quite literally a fake article and to twist the narrative. So I think I'm coming into this understanding, and also another long-term friend who's studied past historical wartime events. There are major things that happen in every single one of these where we don't ever really get the full truth. I don't think there's clean hands on either side other than the civilians. I think people in power have a great responsibility to their countries. I know that God has a heart for countries and people. But I also know this other thing. The people in power are there either because we voted or we let them in, or we let them remain. And I want to remind people that prayer is not your last line of defense. It is your first weapon of offense. And we need to pray. We need to pray for the protection of the civilians and those who are innocent, because they don't deserve to go through what they're going through. At the same time, we know that the current president of the Ukraine was put in there after a government coup, and again, other governments meddling. And we won't go into whether or not my opinion matters as to that being okay or not. Only we will say that people have messed with things that perhaps they shouldn't have. And if we don't think with my American point of view, or the general American point of view, and we kind of take a step back and we realize the rest of the world doesn't think the way that we do, and a lot of them would consider us soft. And I'm not even talking about whether or not that's right or wrong. I'm just talking about, let's all step back and recognize from another point of view that a lot of the world actually accepts very domineering forms of government. And that doesn't mean that everybody does. But again, people have in government what they have allowed, not always voted in, but allowed. And that can mean standing up and demanding a change. It can also mean praying that people's hearts are changed. But quite frankly, there are madmen who are literally in power in different major countries in this world. Putin's not the only one. There are ones in what we consider first world countries where rights are being eroded away quickly. And how much have we really done about it? Long before the lockdowns of COVID, they already made simply reading certain things from the Bible illegal in Canada, which we consider a first world country. And there are pastors who have been locked up for it. Have we stood up? Have we done anything about it? When you look at the events of genocide, most of the time, there's actually a majority of people who have either supported it passively or even openly. The genocide that, I know certain keywords, let's just say the WW2 event, genocide, most of those people were turned in by their neighbors. We talk about it, but we started with COVID, what we said we'd never do, or we'd stand up and prevent, but we didn't. And here we have, there's a theater, there's hospitals, there's places where nothing but civilians have been taking refuge that were directly attacked recently in this event. So I don't know, everybody may or may not be following the details. We may not be getting a hold of it, but there are things that should not be happening. So regardless of who's right or wrong, or even the outcome of the war, we need to pray for the people who are suffering and going through it. And we need to recognize that there are other things going on, and sometimes they happen because of many years of allowing them to go on in small steps that erode away certain things until they get worse and worse and worse. All of a sudden they come to the head and we go, oh, that's terrible. But is it really new? The greatest moves of God that we have ever seen have happened during major events of either people dying in wars or getting sick, where people finally get out of being comfortable and stand up and say enough. Are we doing that in this time? I know some people are. I know a lot of people are busy simply having opinions. So pray. Pray for people who shouldn't go through this. Make your voice be heard, especially if you have any form of influence. Because if we are quiet, then we allow what we do not stand up against. So this may not do much, but this is me stating how I feel. I feel that we have a responsibility as men and women to say what we will and will not tolerate. And if we are heard loudly enough of us, then our own government, those who represent us, will have to listen. Because quite frankly, if they don't do something, then when it comes to being elected again, they won't be. So that is something that they need to know, that they simply don't do what they feel like, and we're indifferent. Because when we're indifferent, their opinions are the only ones they ever worry about, because we don't let them know that they have to do anything different. So I hope that makes sense. I know sometimes I'm a little convoluted in the way I speak things. But the point is, in this hour, that we, especially when we have freedom of speech, at least to whatever degree we can, except for the occasional thing that gets labeled as hate speech simply because someone doesn't agree, but I digress. Right now we can speak up and say that things that are going on are inexcusable, even if there are certain groups that shouldn't be in the Ukraine. And don't forget that thousands of Russian families will not see their sons ever again. And they had no clue it was coming. People are suffering on all sides. And all because of a few people who have gone bad. Again, you can disagree with a leader who's in a country. You cannot like them. But you are still supposed to pray for people in power. So you let God sort out whether they should or shouldn't be there, whether their hearts can change or not, but you still pray. You pray for the people. You pray that the responsibility of the decisions be weighed upon heavily on those in power, and that they see the consequences, and that they know that they will be judged by a higher standard because of the responsibility they bear. And that alone, their actions, good or bad, will be judged by. That really sums it up.